For decades, Franklin Graham has been seen by millions as a symbol of unwavering faith, moral conviction, and spiritual authority. On stages across the world, in stadiums filled with thousands, and through television screens in countless homes, he has spoken with confidence about belief, purpose, and responsibility. To many supporters, he represents strength in uncertain times. To critics, he represents controversy and contradiction. But behind every public figure lies a private story that is rarely told in full. In Franklin Graham's case, that story is not one of simple success or inherited privilege. It is a complex journey shaped by pressure, doubt, rebellion, sacrifice, and personal struggle. Long before he became a global religious leader, he was a young boy growing up in the shadow of one of the most famous preachers in modern history. That shadow brought admiration, opportunity, and influence. But it also brought expectations that were almost impossible to escape. Understanding Franklin Graham's life requires looking beyond headlines and political debates and into the quiet moments that shaped his character. It requires recognizing that faith leaders, like anyone else, are shaped not only by belief, but by family, fear, and personal conflict. Franklin Graham was born on July 14, 1952, in Asheville, North Carolina, as the fourth of 5 children of Billy Graham and Ruth Bell Graham. From the outside, the Graham household appeared peaceful and deeply rooted in Christian values. The family lived in a modest log cabin in the Appalachian Mountains, surrounded by nature and simplicity. Visitors often described the home as warm, disciplined, and spiritually focused. However, behind this calm setting existed a reality few outsiders fully understood. Billy Graham was not only a father. He was a global figure whose ministry took him across continents and into meetings with presidents and world leaders. His schedule meant that he was often away from home for long periods. While he loved his children deeply, his mission demanded constant travel. For Franklin and his siblings, this created a complicated emotional landscape. They admired their father, but they also missed him. They learned early that their family life would always be shared with the public. For Franklin especially, this meant growing up with both privilege and emotional distance, learning to navigate admiration and absence at the same time. As Franklin grew older, the pressure of his father's reputation became increasingly difficult to manage. Everywhere he went, people saw him not as an individual, but as Billy Graham's son. Teachers, church members, and family friends often assumed he would naturally follow the same spiritual path. Few asked what he personally wanted. Fewer still considered how heavy those expectations might feel. Franklin later admitted that he feared never being able to measure up to his father's legacy. Billy Graham was respected across political and religious lines. He was known for humility, discipline, and restraint. To be compared to such a figure daily created a sense of emotional suffocation. Rather than feeling inspired, Franklin often felt trapped. He did not reject faith itself. Instead, he resisted the role that seemed predetermined for him. He wanted an identity that was his own, separate from sermons and stadiums. This internal conflict slowly shaped his personality. He became restless, impatient, and determined to define himself on his own terms, even if that meant disappointing those closest to him. Franklin's mother, Ruth Bell Graham, played a powerful and complex role in his upbringing. Known for her intelligence, humor, and strong will, Ruth believed in discipline blended with creativity. She was not afraid to challenge her children, and she felt they were becoming careless or complacent. One famous story from Franklin's childhood describes how she once slid firecrackers under his bedroom door to force him awake for school. While humorous in retrospect, the incident reflected deeper patterns. Franklin was strong-willed from a young age. He questioned authority and resisted routine. He loved outdoor adventures, physical challenges, and freedom more than structure and schedules. His personality often clashed with expectations of obedience and restraint. Teachers described him as intelligent but distracted. Family members noticed his tendency to push boundaries. These traits did not mean he lacked character. They meant he struggled with conformity. Over time, that struggle evolved into open rebellion, especially during his teenage years, when emotional confusion and external pressure began to collide. By the time Franklin reached adolescence, his resistance had intensified into behavior that worried his family deeply. He later described himself during this period as a bad kid, not because he lacked morals, but because he lacked direction. He began experimenting with alcohol, smoking, and physical fights. He associated with peers who reinforced his defiance rather than challenging it. Concerned for his future, Billy and Ruth decided to send him to Stony Brook School, a strict Christian boarding school in New York. Their hope was that discipline and structure would guide him back toward stability. Instead, the rigid environment made him feel even more confined. Franklin rebelled further and eventually dropped out. A second attempt at academic stability at LeTourneau Christian College ended similarly when he was expelled for breaking curfew. By his early 20s, Franklin had become a source of quiet anxiety within the family. Despite their influence and faith, they could not reach him. He was caught between resentment toward expectations and shame over his failures, unsure of who he was meant to become. By the early 1970s, Franklin Graham's life appeared unstable both emotionally and spiritually. Although he was surrounded by faith, opportunity, and support, he felt disconnected from all three. He moved from place to place, trying different jobs and educational paths, but none of them seemed to provide lasting direction. Inside, he carried unresolved anger and confusion. He struggled with the feeling that no matter what he did, he would always be judged through the lens of his father's reputation. This constant comparison created a sense of failure even before he had truly begun his own journey. During this period, Franklin often avoided serious conversations about his future. Instead, he focused on short-term pleasures and distractions. Friends noticed his unpredictable behavior. Family members sensed his growing distance. While he appeared confident on the surface, privately he felt uncertain and disconnected. This emotional imbalance would eventually push him toward a breaking point that would redefine his life. In 1974, Franklin completed an associate degree at Montreat-Anderson College. For his parents, this achievement represented hope that he was finally finding stability. On paper, it looked like progress. Yet internally, Franklin remained restless. Around this time, he joined his father on a trip through Europe. The journey was meant to strengthen their relationship and offer spiritual guidance. Instead, it revealed how far Franklin had drifted. During the trip, he relied heavily on alcohol and avoided serious reflection. Discipline felt optional. Responsibility felt distant. One evening, Billy Graham decided to confront his son privately. He did not preach or criticize. He spoke honestly and emotionally. He told Franklin that he and Ruth believed there was a spiritual battle over his life and that he would eventually have to choose his direction. Franklin listened silently. He offered no argument. But the words stayed with him, quietly reshaping his thoughts. Shortly after that conversation, the journey took Franklin to Jerusalem. Surrounded by historic religious sites and ancient traditions, he found himself unexpectedly reflective. One evening, instead of going out, he stayed alone in his hotel room. With no distractions, he picked up a Bible and began reading the Gospel of John. Slowly, carefully, he worked through the passages. When he reached the 3rd chapter, where Jesus speaks about being born again, something shifted inside him. For the first time, the message felt personal. It was not symbolic or distant. It felt directed at him alone. Franklin later described this moment as deeply emotional and transformative. Alone in that quiet room, he acknowledged his mistakes, his fears, and his emptiness. He committed himself to faith in a way he never had before. There were no witnesses, no dramatic scenes, only honesty and surrender. This moment in Jerusalem did not instantly turn Franklin into a polished preacher or public leader. Instead, it marked the beginning of slow and deliberate change. He returned home with a renewed sense of responsibility and humility. He began rebuilding habits that he had long neglected, including discipline, study, and self-reflection. In 1978, he earned a Bachelor of Arts degree from Appalachian State University. For many people, a college degree is routine. For Franklin, it symbolized perseverance and personal growth. It represented proof that he could commit to long-term goals. More importantly, it showed his family that he was serious about change. Yet even after graduation, Franklin did not feel called immediately to traditional ministry. He sensed that his faith needed practical expression. He wanted to serve people directly, especially those facing suffering and injustice. Around this time, Franklin met Bob Pierce, the founder of Samaritan's Purse, an organization dedicated to humanitarian aid. Pierce invited Franklin on a 6-week mission trip to Asia. Franklin accepted without fully understanding what awaited him. The experience proved life-changing. He witnessed extreme poverty, war damage, hunger, and disease. He saw children without access to education or health care. He met families who had lost everything. These encounters shattered any remaining illusions of comfort and control. Franklin realized that faith was not only about belief or sermons, it was about action and service. He began to understand that his personal struggles had prepared him for empathy and leadership. The suffering he witnessed did not create guilt. It created responsibility. For the first time, Franklin felt confident that his life had a purpose beyond personal success. This realization would soon guide his future work and public mission. After returning from Asia, Franklin Graham's perspective on life had fundamentally changed. He was no longer searching for identity through rebellion or escape. Instead, he was learning to lead through service. In 1978, he joined the board of Samaritan's Purse, gradually taking on more responsibility. When founder Bob Pierce passed away in 1979, the organization faced uncertainty. Many questioned whether Franklin, still young and carrying a troubled past, was ready to lead. Despite these doubts, he was elected president. The decision surprised observers but reflected the trust he had earned through dedication and humility. Franklin approached leadership differently from his father's public ministry. He focused on logistics, disaster response, and building strong field teams. Under his guidance, Samaritan's Purse expanded rapidly, responding to crises around the world. Through this work, Franklin discovered that leadership was not about recognition. It was about reliability, sacrifice, and consistent service in difficult environments. While Franklin's humanitarian work flourished, his spiritual calling continued to develop. In 1982, he was ordained by Grace Community Church in Arizona. This marked his formal entry into preaching ministry. However, unlike many young ministers, Franklin remained cautious. He understood the dangers of ambition and comparison. He did not want to imitate his father's style or compete with his legacy. Instead, he focused on authenticity and personal conviction. In 1989, he partnered with the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association for his first major outreach. This was a critical test. Public expectations were high, and criticism was intense. Some doubted his sincerity. Others questioned his temperament. Yet Franklin persevered. Over time, he earned respect through consistency and discipline. His approach was more direct and outspoken than his father, reflecting both generational change and personal experience. As Billy Graham's health declined in the 1990s, Franklin gradually assumed more leadership responsibilities. In 1995, he was appointed vice president of the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association. Behind the scenes, he managed operations, coordinated global campaigns, and represented the ministry internationally. These years were emotionally complex. Franklin was not only stepping into leadership. He was watching his father slowly withdraw from public life due to Parkinson's disease. The transition was painful but necessary. In 2000, Franklin became CEO of the organization. Although the role brought authority, it also brought intense scrutiny. Every decision was compared to Billy Graham's legacy. Critics questioned whether Franklin could preserve the organization's credibility. Supporters believed his honesty and strength were essential for the next era. Franklin himself viewed the role as stewardship rather than power. Amid public responsibilities, Franklin's private life remained centered on family. His marriage to Jane Austen Cunningham in 1974 provided emotional stability during turbulent years. Jane chose to remain largely outside the spotlight. She focused on raising their 4 children and maintaining a grounded home environment. The family settled in Boone, North Carolina, away from media attention. Jane became Franklin's strongest supporter and most honest advisor. While Franklin traveled extensively, she managed daily life and nurtured emotional resilience within the family. She also supported staff families connected to Samaritan's Purse, understanding the strain of long separations. Her quiet leadership strengthened the foundation of both family and ministry. Without public recognition, she helped sustain Franklin's ability to continue demanding work. As Franklin's influence expanded, so did public controversy. Unlike his father, who avoided political alignment, Franklin became increasingly outspoken. He viewed political engagement as a moral responsibility. His strong support for Donald Trump divided supporters and critics alike. Some praised his courage. Others accused him of compromising spiritual neutrality. Tensions escalated when Christianity Today published an editorial criticizing Trump's leadership. Franklin publicly condemned the article, arguing it misrepresented Christian values. His response intensified debate within evangelical circles. For the first time, criticism came not only from outsiders, but from members of his own family. The conflict revealed deeper ideological divisions about faith, leadership, and public responsibility. These internal disagreements became visible when Billy Graham's grandson, Aram Chivian, questioned Franklin's political statements online. His comments were followed by similar concerns from other relatives. They argued that Billy Graham's legacy emphasized unity rather than partisanship. The exchange was painful and deeply personal. It reflected a broader struggle within religious communities about political identity. For Franklin, these disputes were emotionally challenging. He felt misunderstood and unfairly judged, yet he continued defending his position. The disagreements did not destroy family relationships, but they created distance and discomfort. They also reminded observers that even respected families face internal conflict and ideological diversity. In 2021, Franklin Graham faced one of the most serious challenges of his life when he was diagnosed with constrictive pericarditis, a rare heart condition. The illness restricted his heart's ability to function properly. In November, he underwent major surgery. For the first time, his public image of strength was replaced with visible vulnerability. Jane and their children shared updates, requesting prayers from supporters. The response was overwhelming. Millions expressed concern and solidarity. The episode reminded followers that faith leaders are not immune to physical limitations. It also forced Franklin to reconsider priorities, health, and long-term planning. After his recovery, Franklin resumed leadership with greater awareness.